Do vegan men give women the ick? Let's talk about it. Last week I saw a lot of people online talking about this article in Vice. We asked women if vegan men gave them the ick. For those of you who have healthy boundaries with the internet, let me explain to you what the ick is. It is a phrase that has blown up in popularity, mainly thanks to TikTok. Getting the ick, giving someone the ick. Essentially it means a turn-off, someone being turned off. It started, I believe, with women complaining about things that guys do that give them the ick. And it has just kind of exploded in popularity as a way for women to essentially roast men online. Sometimes it's about their boyfriends, sometimes it's just about a guy they've gone on a date with or a few dates with. In general, I think it's meant to be pretty funny and lighthearted, but some people seem to take it pretty seriously, like they actually are talking about ways in which guys give them the ick. There's also a really funny account called Guy with the List, and it's basically a guy who screen records the beginning of a woman's video about something that gave her the ick, and then you see the screen recording like going out of TikTok, going into his notes app, and he will add it to his list, and it's very funny. It's got like hundreds, probably thousands on it at this point. But anyway, Vice decided to take this premise of getting the ick and apply it to veganism, inspired by a study that came out in August of last year. I have to admit, when I first came across this article, I assumed that they had done some type of on-the-street segment with a little microphone, just doing these quick little on-the-street style interviews with people. So I assumed they had sent someone out onto a busy street to be like, do vegan men give you the ick? Which I was honestly kind of curious to see. It would have definitely been at least interesting to watch. But no, that's not what they did. We are going to talk about what they did. First, I want to get into the overall premise of the article, the study it was based on. I actually want to talk about the study because I did read it. Then I want to get into some of the history of meat and protein being associated with masculinity. And then we'll get into the responses from the Vice article of how women responded to that prompt. And I want to say in this video, as with the Vice article and with the study, we will be looking at things through a very heteronormative lens. The study really focused specifically on the relationship between men and women. I would be interested to see if these types of dynamics are at play outside of male-female relationships, but since that is the lens or the focus of the article and the study, that's what I will be focusing on as well. Like I said, the Vice article is called "We Asked Women If Vegan Men Gave Them the Ick," and the subheading is "A New Study Says Yes." We're living in an enlightened age, the story goes. Aside from Andrew Tate and a bunch of freak gender-critical obsessives, most people don't judge others' gender identity based on frivolous details like what they enjoy eating. Men don't have to gnaw on red meat to prove their masculinity these days, right? Well, a new study suggests this might be wildly optimistic. According to research published in Sex Roles Journal, men on vegan diets are often perceived as lacking in masculinity. This perception seemed to cut across gender, too. A significant proportion of men participating in the study reportedly felt that male vegans are often viewed as physically weaker and less masculine, and a number of women participants believed there was truth to these stereotypes. Based on seeing this, before I read any further, I decided to take a look at the study. Now, this study looks at perceptions of vegans and vegetarians, so sometimes they refer to them separately, and sometimes they refer to them together, and to designate that, they wrote VEG*N. To make it more simple, whenever they're referring to vegans and vegetarians together, I'm just going to call them veggies. The general findings were that the interplay of diet, role of meat in society, and gender roles has implications both for the social perception of people on a veggie diet and for the experiences of members of the veggie minority who live in predominantly meat-eating communities. The study was done in Poland with Polish participants, so that's something to keep in mind. I don't know much about Polish culture, but from some of the responses in this study, it seems to be a pretty meat-dominated culture, and obviously the results of a study like this would slightly vary depending on the country. The study had two parts. The first part was an online study with 1,048 people. About 5% of them were veggie, which is probably a realistic representation of the culture overall. Participants were asked a series of questions about people on different meatless diets, where they had to rate to what extent they agreed with a series of stereotypical statements. Then they were asked questions to determine their attitudes about vegetarians in romantic relationships. The second part was a focus group with 36 people divided into 6 groups. All of these people were vegans or vegetarians, and they asked all these people various questions about what they felt public perceptions of veggies were, as well as their perceptions of being veggie in a relationship. Here's a few highlights from the results of the first study. More people think that following a veggie diet makes it impossible to do hard physical work or build a muscular figure, which may be due to the fact that people perceive the veggie diet as poor in essential components necessary for normal bodily functioning, thereby reducing physical fitness. If we consider the ability to perform strenuous physical work and the need to develop a muscular figure as a stereotypical cornerstone of masculinity, we can conclude that people on a veggie diet are perceived as less masculine than people on a vegetarian diet among those who believe that only a meat-based diet can fulfill the requirements for a strong muscular physique and performance. I just realized that's a pretty confusing sentence. I think what they're saying is we can conclude that those on a veggie diet are perceived as less masculine. They might have meant to say there than people on an omnivore diet, among those who believe that only a meat-based diet can fulfill the requirements for a strong muscular physique and performance. I have to say I felt that was a bit of a jump by the researchers. If we consider the ability to perform strenuous physical work and the need to develop muscular figure as a stereotypical cornerstone of masculinity, but that wasn't a question. There wasn't a question about, does performing strenuous work make you more masculine? I'm guessing if that were a question, most people would have said yes, but they were extrapolating a bit here. But then again, that sentence was confusing as fuck, so who even knows? 59% of participants believed that a vegetarian diet is not suitable for men, and 69% believed that it is easier for women to give up eating meat than it is for men. Moving on to attitudes in relationships, compared with men, women are significantly more open to their partner switching to a vegetarian diet. More men than women believe that they would be unhappy if their partner became vegetarian. In contrast, women were more likely than men to say they would be satisfied with such a change in their partner. Men were more likely than women to believe that it would decrease the quality of their relationship and the attractiveness of their partner. So I'm a little confused here because the Vice article summed up the study as saying women say vegan men give them the ick. But actually in this part, the results show men not being attracted to vegetarian women more than the opposite. Now, of course, the questions asked were specifically regarding vegetarianism here, not veganism, but still they're talking about being open to a partner going from eating meat to not eating meat, which feels pretty significant. Let's move on to the second part of the study. This was 36 veggies divided into 6 focus groups with 6 people each. One group was vegan women, one group was vegan men, one group was vegetarian males for health reasons, another group was vegetarian males for ethical reasons, and then you had vegetarian females for health reasons and vegetarian females for ethical reasons. So they divided the vegetarians up into ethical and health, which I thought was kind of interesting. Obviously they wouldn't do that for vegans because the assumption is vegans are all doing it for ethics. And in these focus groups, they asked them questions about how they believe they're perceived by others. A few different themes came up. One is the urban lefty stereotype. People following a veggie diet are perceived as urban hipsters and people with left-wing views. Another is the crazy vegetarist stereotype. I found this one interesting because I have never heard that word before, vegetarist. It is pretty clever, I have to say. I was a bit confused though because this is Poland where they speak Polish, and vegetarist is a sort of a play on the English words of vegetarian and terrorist. So is that a translation of the Polish pun, or do Polish people call it that? Do you know what I'm saying? The participants were aware of this stereotype, however, they did not agree that the stereotypical traits apply to them personally, but only to a certain extreme minority that they are not a part of. But because this minority is the most active and undertakes the most pro-animal activities, the entire group is perceived in a negative light. So I guess vegans and vegetarians would agree that whoever is an animal rights activist is rightly considered a vegetarist. Another theme was the weak, unmanly, and gay stereotype. This one was specifically associated with men. Hearing the saying vegan today, gay tomorrow was mentioned by male participants across all focus groups. These beliefs were assessed by male veggies as hurtful. I have never heard this phrase before. I have to say I laughed when I first heard it because it is so ridiculous. But on a more serious note, it is pretty offensive on multiple levels, possibly speaks to internalized homophobia within Polish culture, as well as, of course, anti-vegan sentiment. Some of the women did acknowledge that they were aware they had internalized stereotypes about people needing meat to be physically strong. Moving on to general sentiments about dating as a veggie, the first line here is, the respondents did not indicate any relationship problems because of being veggie, which is also interesting because that's not really what the Vice article implied. I want to read an excerpt from this section because I found it really interesting. Very often when one person in a relationship is or becomes a vegetarian, the other person gradually changes their eating habits as well. Among the focus group participants, women were more often the initiators of vegginess, whereas among men in relationships, only one was in a relationship with a meat-eating woman and the rest had converted to vegetarianism or veganism because of their female partners. In such a situation, usually the partner also gradually reduced their consumption of meat. This was often due to pragmatic reasons, eliminating the need to cook different dishes, but there was also an emerging sensitivity to ethical or health-related issues under the influence of the non-meat-eating partner. In the case of men on plant-based diets, their female partners were usually the first veggies they encountered. Men began to pay attention to animal welfare or the health effects of meat because of the information they received from their female partners. They also changed their diet because it was simply easier when the partners lived together. However, the men emphasized that this process was never coercive, rather their partners gave them a stimulus to think about their own dietary choices. I did a video last year about whether vegans and non-vegans should date because this is a question I see all the time online, people asking other vegans what their opinion is on this. I think oftentimes because they're trying to figure it out for themselves. Obviously, it's a very personal decision and there's no right answer. But for me, I'm going to put these focus group results in the category of me believing it can be a good thing for vegans and non-vegans to date. Like I said though, this is completely subjective and there are so many different factors at play with romantic relationships, but I just thought that was interesting. This part of the study was also done in November of 2019. To me, that feels pretty significant because a lot has changed in the last 4+ years. Now, some might say anti-vegan rhetoric has increased, but I would say veganism has become even more normalized, even more accepted since then. So I do wonder if the results would be slightly different if this study were to be done today. The conclusion was changing the perception of veggies as weak and unmasculine may help reduce the social stigma attached to vegginess, which appears to be one important barrier for men in switching to meat-free diets. Speaking of meat and masculinity, I want to get into a brief history of meat's association with masculinity. And this is going to be a very short history because this topic could be a major deep dive, but just a few points today in support of the study and the article. I had remembered a section of the China study that talked about protein and kind of the history of protein, so I wanted to read a little excerpt from it. Ever since the discovery of this nitrogen-containing chemical in 1839 by the Dutch chemist Gerard Mulder, protein has loomed as the most sacred of all nutrients. The word protein comes from the Greek word proteos, which means of prime importance. Early scientists like Carl Voigt, a prominent German scientist who was alive from 1831 to 1908, were staunch champions of protein. Voigt found that man needed only 48.5 grams per day, but nonetheless he recommended a whopping 118 grams per day because of the cultural bias at the time. Protein equaled meat, and everyone aspired to have meat on his or her table, just as we aspire to have bigger houses and faster cars. Voigt figured you can't get too much of a good thing. Major Mackay, a prominent English physician in the early 20th century, provided one of the more entertaining but most unfortunate moments in this history. Physician Mackay was stationed in the English colony of India in 1912 to identify good fighting men in the Indian tribes. So I actually found the book that was written by Major D. Mackay. It's called The Protein Element in Nutrition, and this is a quote from his book. All the evidence we have been able to collect from observations on the different tribes and races of India points to a high level of protein interchange in the body being accompanied by a high development development of physique and manly qualities, whilst under the opposite conditions, poor physique and a cringing, effeminate disposition is all that can be expected. And if you search for the word effeminate in this book, it comes up, I think, 5 different times. I don't know how influential this book was. According to the China study, he was a prominent English physician, so maybe he was pretty influential in the science world at that time, but his repeated associations of meat with manliness and lack of eating meat with effeminateness and also weak physical traits probably set in motion a lot of the attitudes that people still have today. Let's get into what some of the women interviewed for Vice had to say. The author makes a few jokes about the very scientific methods they used, which is clearly a joke because the methods were extremely unscientific. It seems like they basically put out a few questions on Instagram and Twitter, but they didn't link to either post, and when I went to the Vice Instagram and went to the Vice Twitter, I couldn't find these posts. If the posts exist, why wouldn't they link to them? That just seems like a missed opportunity for synergy across platforms. Based on a lot of the spelling in the article and the way things are phrased, I'm pretty sure that the author and the people questioned are based in the UK. I'm assuming the question was, do vegan men give you the ick? Here is the first group of responses. Yes, one woman responded immediately and decisively. Yeah, hate to say it, but I love a man that eats meat. Another shot over. Yes, is that bad? Another asked before admitting she was speaking as an ex-vegan herself. I do get the ick a little, but that probably says more about me than them. A fourth woman confessed. I worry that their farts will smell all corny, and I love cooking steak, so it's a defo ick for me, a fifth reported, definitely revealing more about herself than anything else in the process. I don't know what to say about these responses, other than that a lot of these women seem to be pretty immature. Farts will smell corny? Like, isn't it sort of well documented that people who eat a lot of animal products have the worst smelling farts? The article also flippantly states that Jay-Z and Beyonce are vegan, which is so frustrating. Like, no, they're not, and that's okay. They fund a lot of vegan ventures. They've never said that they're vegan. I have discussed on my channel before how it can be problematic to state that celebrities are vegan, or that we're often too eager to talk about celebrities being vegan, and this is just a really annoying example of that. We don't need Beyonce and Jay-Z to be vegan to have veganism be important and meaningful. These were apparently responses from the author's group chat. I don't see a vegan man as less masculine, and it definitely wouldn't give me the ick. To be honest, I'd quite like it because I'd probably end up eating healthier. Being vegan might mean they're a better, more creative cook, which is a pretty hot trait in my book. I have lots of friends with intolerances and allergies, and I have other friends who struggle to cook for them because they're not used to adapting ingredients. These were all pretty reasonable responses, I guess, more open-minded than the first set, although the one person is only turned on because maybe a vegan guy could cook for your other friends who aren't vegan but have other intolerances. When I turn the question over to the wider internet ecosystem, 28-year-old Martha is quick to pitch in. Honestly, for me, it's just unsexy. Also, cooking, eating out, and being open to trying new kinds of food is such a big part of what I enjoy doing. Veganism is an immediate blocker to doing that. No, it's not, Martha. Do you hear yourself, Martha? She immediately contradicts herself. Eating out and being open to trying new kinds of food is such a big part of what she does, but apparently she's excluding vegan food from that. Saying veganism is an immediate blocker to doing that is so fucking ignorant. If these people are based in the UK, just look at all the places I went in my London vlogs. Tell me those aren't elevated culinary experiences that anyone with any sort of taste would be able to enjoy. She goes on to say she admires the discipline and the moral ethical cause behind veganism, but this doesn't translate to desire. It's just not sexy to me. Okay, Martha, okay. Someone the author knows said, having a boyfriend passionately doing veganuary right now, it will not surprise you when I say no. To me, it shows they have a strong moral compass and believe in something. It almost doesn't matter that it's about being vegan specifically, but it's just a good indicator that they care about something. I was with this person until that last sentence. Is the bar so low for men that just them caring about anything is good? Like, that Good! You care about something, good! Someone else said, I genuinely think I'd find it more of an ick if someone refused veggies and would only have meat. In fact, it would give me mega ick. I don't mind a bit of a gym bro, but sole focus on meat just says man-child to me. It also kind of gives caveman vibes. Another response, raw meat feels grossly masculine, but veganism is a huge ick for men and women because I think it's so preachy. I think influencers have kind of infected my association with vegans. Vegan influencers are always like, look at this bally lifestyle I have, where I promote veganism and say it cures cancer. Eye roll emoji. Red meat blokes are more of an incel-y ick, where vegan men is like, I don't want to join your sex cult of loving celery. This one is layered. And it mostly just points to the issue of veganism being misappropriated and misattributed to raw food fanatics, or fruitarians, or health freaks in general who happen to not consume any animal products. This is a big issue spanning back over a decade, especially on YouTube, of these things getting conflated with veganism. But I'd hope the general population is smart enough to recognize the difference between people making outlandish health claims and people who live a vegan lifestyle in protest of animal exploitation. Someone else says, with the likes of Woody Harrelson and Joaquin Phoenix as vegan male role models, there's definitely not a short supply of literally hot vegan men. Also, lots of athletes are discovering vast energy benefits to plant-based eating, so we now have super fit, hot vegan men too. I would struggle to be attracted to an old school meat-eating man because it's all a bit last century, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Dating vegan men would be fine as long as they don't go on about it. Obviously, I roll at that last part, but I think this speaks to the importance of having not just hot vegan men, but also the vegan bodybuilder types. People literally need to be handheld to the realization that you can build muscle on a vegan diet. This answer was from a vegan. As with literally any ideology, if the seriousness doesn't come with humor and vital absence of preachy sanctimoniousness, then it's unbearable. Also, nobody wants to be talking about anyone's dietary requirements or choices all the time. It should be basically invisible. I don't agree with this. I don't think you have to hide anything. I think you can be smart in terms of trying to be a pleasant human for others to be around, and everybody could interpret that to mean what they will, but I don't agree that your veganism should be invisible. The article concludes, so there you have it folks, low maintenance vegans only. Basically, it's not what you eat, it's the way you eat it. In the grand scheme of things, diet probably isn't the deciding factor of whether you shag or not anyway. As Jazz puts it, I really couldn't care less what anyone puts in their mouth. How's that for enlightened? For them to be like, well, there you have it, as if they made any type of meaningful or insightful, conclusive argument is an absolute joke. Like, what was the point of this article? They took an interesting premise and they just like farted it away. Overall, this article displays a profound misunderstanding of veganism, and most of the negative responses seem to come from a hypothetical standpoint, not from actual experiences they've had of dating vegan men, which I think really comes down to ignorance and lack of exposure. And I think most people just go off of what very limited interactions they've had or stories they've heard from other people, which is why I think it's important when we're around people to be forthcoming about the fact that we're vegan, because not all of us are the same. We all have different personalities, we all look different, we're all passionate about the cause, but we may express that passion differently, and I think it's important for people to see that. There's also been lots of musings on reasons why vegans may be more objectively attractive. I won't really go into those because of course attraction is subjective, but there are a lot of compelling reasons there. I think headlines like this, articles like this, are super problematic for the movement. The last thing we need is people giving themselves one more reason not to go vegan, i.e. a single man not wanting to give a woman the ick. If someone is going to be turned off by your veganism, is that someone that you want to date anyway? I will end on a personal note by sharing that I have never been more attracted to someone than I was meeting Paul, my boyfriend, for the first time. At that time, he wasn't completely vegan. I would say he ate mostly vegan at that time, but some of you know this, Paul is a lifelong vegetarian. He has never eaten meat. And from what I understand, he has always been pretty popular with the ladies. So if anything, who knows, maybe his vegetarianism made him more attractive. What do you guys think about this article? Is this even a real stereotype? Is it even worth talking about it? Are articles like this just making things worse, or is it good because it sparks conversations like this? And if this is a real stereotype, what can we do to dispel it moving forward? Let me know all your thoughts. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for more of my videos. Hit the bell to be notified when I upload. And I'll see you again soon. Bye!